Good morning, afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm Paul Elam, and I'm late. You're not late, I'm late, and Dr. T is late. But welcome to, despite what my lower third says, this is going mental. And tonight we're going to be, as you can tell, we're sometimes technically challenged around here. But we're going to be talking more tonight about saying goodbye to crazy. We talked about that last time on Going Mental. But first, before we get to more details on that, let me not be remiss in saying hello, Dr. T. Good to see you.
Hi, Paul.
Good to see your puppy, too.
Yes. The reason we're late is because I didn't see the Skype message earlier that we were doing the program, so I was in the shower when Paul called. So
I was sitting here and look at me. I was white knighting, trying to take all the blame for this, and she just stole my thunder. Burned twice. Okay.
It was my bad.
So speaking of being burned by women, no, just kidding. We are talking about a little bit more of an expanded conversation about how to more efficiently kick crazy to the curb, which I think I can speak for Dr. T here in saying that in almost every case, that timing should be like as quickly as possible. As soon as you know it's crazy, start kicking figuratively to the curb and get on with your life. And one of the things that we were chatting about a minute before we got started tonight was how much of this stuff is attitude dependent. That it is one thing. I mean, we can sit here and tell people, here's what you need to do. Like if you just have a crazy girlfriend and you're not living with her, then just quit returning her calls, tell her you broke up with her, that you're not going to see her anymore. But there's a lot of guys that just aren't ready to do that. They just haven't had enough pain, haven't had enough misery, and they just sort of insist on saying, no, I've got to go until I'm bleeding in the street and until I'm maybe dead. But what's your assessment of that, Dr. T? How much of really actually getting rid of craziness in your life, whether it's wife, husband, boyfriend, girlfriend, boss, employer, friend, relative, how much of that is about the willingness to do
it? A lot of it, I would say the willingness to do it is a great percentage of it, but some people, particularly the men and women I work with, they're willing, but there are other issues at play. You know, they really do want crazy gone, but there's fear of retribution, as we've discussed before. They have the misbelief that taking care of themselves and going no contact is being mean, that enforcing healthy boundaries is mean. So oftentimes, the willingness is there, but they have other obstacles in their way, which are sometimes cultural beliefs, like, oh, well, it's mean not to return a woman's calls. In fact, I think that there's some domestic violence shelters now that are listing that as a form of abuse. Not returning your girlfriend's or ex-girlfriend's calls is now considered emotional abuse by some DV organizations.
and if you do return them, you're stalking.
But whatever. I once knew a man, bless his heart, who he had some resources to do this. So he did it gradually. He rented the apartment next door to his in New York City for her cat, theoretically, and then kind of got her in there and then bought an apartment in a different building, which I guess worked for him. But it's, on the surface, it's easy to say, well, if you're not married and you don't have any kids, just get her out. But with crazy, particularly a crazy who doesn't want to go, it's not always that easy.
Well, I agree, but sometimes, and again, dealing with crazy is not like an uncommon experience. You know, I think everybody has been in at least one crazy relationship if they're old enough to shave or, uh, you know, have been out of the home more than a few months. It is just really common for people to hook up with crazy, not knowing any better, and there's a lot of crazy out there. Sometimes, and I know I'm a sort of a hardcore case about this because, I came by it honestly. I did it from being involved with crazy and dealing with that many years past the point that I ever should have. And for me personally, I just got to say that it was a matter of not having enough mental toughness
Mm-hmm.
to say, you know what, getting rid of crazy is not mean. It's not bad. It doesn't make me the bad guy. It doesn't mean that I'm mistreating anybody. Um, and also, it meant that I was going to have to let go of somebody that deep down inside, I really still had reservations. There's still that part of me that was just like wanted to hang on no matter what, thinking that crazy would wake up the next day and be sane, which, of course, is just,
A reverse Kafka metamorphosis with crazy. The
yes.
cockroach doesn't turn into a human being.
Yeah, they don't wake up the next day sane. Ever. Ever. They never, it never happens. And guys, if you think you're going to be the exception, no, you're not. You're not going to be the exception. If you're dealing with crazy, you're going to be dealing with crazy from now on. And so I think for me, part of it was just having to be tough on myself to say, you know what, okay, so it's going to hurt to let her go.
Right. Well, and that we're talking about trying to avoid the grief, right?
Yep. And
That's
that's
about.
exactly what it was for me. It was more about avoiding grief than really feeling like a bad guy for doing it. Because once I got to the point that I didn't care whether or not I grieved, I grieved a lot less. So
Well, and honestly, the going through the grieving process, which can bring up a lot of pain, stuff from childhood, particularly if you come from a family of origin that has issues like your current crazy. Um, it's a complicated grief. It's not a straightforward one because in addition to grieving the loss of the fantasy that you fell in love with, because that's what you fell in love with. You fell in love with whatever fantasy image of the perfect girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, wife that crazy created during the honeymoon and seduction or love bombing stage, whatever you want to call it. And it's hard to let go of that because in the early stages, not in every case with crazy. Like there's some relationships where crazy was right out there at the beginning, waving her crazy flag, and people got involved with her anyway. But in the beginning, they will often act as if like they can suss out what your ideal version of woman or man is, and they will play that role for a time. So you feel like, oh my God, I am the luckiest man or woman in the world. Here is the person I've been waiting for all my life. But really, what you fell in love with was some ideal image that you created that they were reflecting back at you.
and that does make it tougher to grieve too when you begin the relationship with that sort of fantasy about who that person is, because when they're really good at it, they can make you feel like you hit the lottery or that you hit the big payoff in the casino. Oh my God, I've been waiting for this person all my life. She does this way, that. I mean, it's just all so good. And she's a Beatles fan, and I love the Beatles, and whatever it takes to be what you want to see, they're very good at it, and so that makes the grieving harder. I just sometimes wonder how averse to whether we're really talking about more about men that are worried about feeling bad. They really want her to go, but they feel like the bad guy if they do it, versus guys that if you really dug past all that, what you would still find is this guy that's still locked on to the hope that she's really like she was when they started, and that he
that
can
person
get back to that.
that
Yeah.
person person might come back, and the next guy is going to get the benefit of all of that. And you know what? The next guy will get love bombed as well. But also eventually she's going to come out again, or he's going to come out again, whatever the case may be, and he's going to get treated to the same emotional abuse, physical abuse, financial abuse, whatever you were suffering, that you did. In fact, I wrote an article about this a couple of years ago. You can find it on the Shrink for Men site, called Crazy Bitch the Musical. Because it's like the same Broadway play that the performance goes on night after night, and maybe the actors change, but the story doesn't.
Well, yeah, there's that, and there's also, I've talked to men who have can't figure out why the woman they picked up in the topless bar didn't turn out to be the best partner for them, and then they're right back in the topless bar.
Well, and we did a show about that a few weeks ago, hairdressers, hookers, and other roads to hell, or something like that.
Yes, something like that. Let me throw something else out there. And you talk.
Can I add one thing that I see that often makes it more difficult to let go of crazy? There are certainly men I work with, and women too, who have such low self-esteem, they don't think that anyone else is going to want them, or that they're going to be able to do any better than crazy, especially if crazy is good looking and they don't, the man or the woman I'm working with doesn't think they're especially attractive or not as attractive as they would like to be. They worry that if they let go of crazy, that they're going to be alone and no one else is going to want them, or even worse, they could end up with somebody even crazier.
Absolutely. I think that is probably a normal part of the grieving process and separation process for most people. They worry, if they've been in a long-term relationship especially, that who's going to want me stuff comes up, and probably a little more intensely with some people. And I think maybe the last piece to add on to that is that there's often childhood issues that people are still trying to resolve conflicts from childhood with their parents. They act those out with their romantic partner, still seeking the approval from the disapproving parent, still trying to measure up, and that the departure of that relationship, the end of the new relationship, is just another reminder that whoever the critical parent was right, that they weren't good enough, you know what I'm getting at there. So all those things, and it's hard to pick with an individual which one is which, but that sort of is part of the process of your work, isn't it? Is that you go in and find out.
Of all of those things, which is especially challenging. But yeah, it's teasing that apart and finding out, because it's, on the surface, most of the guys and women I work with can say, I'm like, okay, you understand that she has these traits and she's done this to you and that to you, and really horrible stuff. Yet you still love her and don't think you can live without somebody who's wiping out your bank account, screwing around on you behind your back, hitting you, lying to you consistently, putting you down. So they know, they know there's a disconnect. They're like, yes, I can see that she or he is treating me horribly, and I absolutely should not want to be around this person at all. But then there's that, and I think it does go back to childhood, that very emotional, irrational belief that they can't be without this person and be happy, even though they're pretty miserable with them.
One of the exercises I've done with clients in the past is to sit down and have them write out everything that is hurtful, harmful, that's going on in their relationship, get them to get that on paper, and then ask them to write down all the things that were hurtful and harmful from one or both of their parents growing up. And it is amazing that you find many, many, many times that those are almost identical lists, and that people are repeating exactly what they grew up with. I don't know how much good it does in terms of developing resolve to get conscious of that. But I do think that if you are conscious of it, that's something it's hard to unlearn. It's going to be stuck in your head that you're doing the same thing. So I suggest that to anybody. If you're in a relationship that's hurtful to you, sit down and make out both of those lists and see if you're not surprised what you come up with.
And that's a great point, because if that is the case, that the person is repeating a relationship from childhood, in essence, divorcing crazy, kicking crazy out, that's, they're essentially having to stand up to the abusive parent that they couldn't stand up to in childhood, and perhaps even have yet to stand up to in adulthood if that parent is still alive.
Absolutely. Now, I wanted to tell you a story a few minutes ago, and because I think this is related. It's something that's just happened recently. When you talk about that sometimes crazy is really good at modeling really good sort of helpful behaviors that will lure somebody in, the love bombing, that sort of thing. Sometimes crazy is just flat out crazy from the beginning. It's obvious people are still attracted to it, but you do notice this stuff more in life. Yesterday I found somebody tweeted me, and I'm not even going to say who she is because I'm not going to give her the attention. But she tweeted me with a video that she had done about me. And if I can pull up this scenario, she took my video. I made my first live video when I'd gotten back from the interview in New York with 2020. Mm-hmm. I did a recorded interview like we're doing now, only I did it on another camera. And I talked to the camera, and I made a joke in the beginning. I said, this is new for me. I'm sort of working my way through this, and so give me feedback. Let me know if you like videos like this, and if you do like them, then I'll certainly do more. And if you don't, then I'll, ignore you and pretend you're a feminist. It was a joke. Right. I thought pretty obviously a joke. Well, this individual made this long video interpreting that this was what I had said was a threat.
I'm going to ignore you. It's a threat.
Yes,
well,
and that is exactly
Narcissist reporter line. Threatening to ignore is that's lethal.
Yes, and that is exactly the verbiage she used, was that I was going to get payback on you by ignoring you if you didn't like this kind of video. And I mean, every borderline radar screen I have lit up like a Christmas tree all around my head. It was just amazing to me to see this, that somebody actually interpreted that me ignoring somebody on the internet was abusive to them. Like I said, guys, there's a lot of crazy out there, particularly in one gender ideological community whose name I won't mention because I don't need to. But, I mean, that isn't so subtle, is it, Dr. T?
No, that's pretty much out there. That's a red flag you could see from outer space.
Well, I probably should have, she said that about 2 minutes into her video. I probably had a pretty good indication when the first 15 or 20 seconds was an image of Adolf Hitler. I will privately link you to this video later, Dr. T. If anybody wants to see it, they can email.
Later we're invading Poland.
What's that?
Later on we're going to invade Poland.
Yes, exactly. Woo! Boy. So, again, dealing with crazy, getting out of these bad relationships involves finding out why you're in a bad relationship. It involves looking at what got you there. It involves having to take a hard look at what you will and won't take in a relationship. And I find that's particularly difficult for a lot of people to know where their lines are, especially if they're deeply attached.
Well, there's that, but it's something one of my actually one of the my favorite former supervisor used to say, just follow the fear. Follow the fear. It's the fear, whatever the fear is, whether it's the fear that nobody else is going to love you or find you attractive, the fear of standing up for yourself, the fear of being perceived as not nice. Whatever that fear, the fear of being not liked. I mean, there are some people who are like, well, they can't handle the thought of somebody not liking them. And as a result, let other people steamroll them.
Yes, I think the acronym that used to go around back in the day for me was that fear itself was an acronym for either face everything and recover or fuck everything and retreat.
I love that. I haven't heard that before.
Well, but again, facing the fears is a very healthy thing to do, and it does take boldness on a. This stuff is not, and again, this is where, I'm pretty hard on myself sometimes because I have all these high expectations. But the fact of the matter is, if you're talking about a problem, an attachment problem from childhood, if you're talking about childhood abuse, constant criticism growing up, and trying to correct that in your mind through a relationship, facing fears around that stuff is one of the most difficult things you can do in your life. It is very, very hard.
It is. It is. And crazy is often quite scary. So there are often legitimate reasons to be afraid, like she is threatened that she's going to claim that you molested the children if you divorce her, or that you're never going to see your kids again, or that she's going to, call your family and say that you look at child pornography. And oftentimes those threats are very real. Crazy will carry out those threats. But I still don't think that's a reason to stay in what is an unhealthy and abusive relationship.
Yeah, one thing we always got to remember is that crazy isn't just good at reading what you like. She's also very, very skilled, or he, at reading what you fear.
Right.
And what you don't want to face. And sometimes it's not the threat of, I'm going to make sure you don't see your children, or I'm going to call your parents and tell them that you look at child porn. Sometimes it is an even more nuanced understanding of an individual's insecurities and fears, and playing on that sense of, you'll never get anybody after me, nobody will want you, really knowing how to stick that dagger in and twist. And when you've got somebody doing that, folks, that's that's when it's time to face things, because that is just absolutely one of the most abusive things that can happen in a relationship, is for somebody to get that far under your skin and then twist, which is what they do. I've been through that one myself. Won't do it again.
Not worth it. Not worth it. Although sometimes you'll find out that the things that crazy will threaten you with aren't actually your fears. They're her fears that she's projecting on you, because if she's deathly afraid of abandonment, then threatening divorce will terrify you, because if she's afraid of abandonment, then so must you be. I had a client I work with who this was his wife's go-to threat. And I said, well, the next time she does that, hand her the yellow pages and tell her to find the number of a divorce attorney. He did it, and she stopped making that threat.
Yep. And I'll use that as an absolutely shameless plug for our book that is coming out on Mother's Day, on Golden Uterus Day. Say Goodbye to Crazy, the book, is going to be released. It's available for pre-order now. Link down there in the low bar. You can get it right now. It'll be auto-delivered to you through Amazon, and you can pre-order right away. But I was explaining to somebody recently who was asking me about the book that this was not a guide on how to feel good. It is not a guide, certainly not a guide for making crazy feel good. It is much more like The Art of War than it is, oh, men are from Mars or women are from Venus. It's
didn't like that book.
no, I didn't like that book either. I read it cover to cover,
I
and I
couldn't
think
get past the first chapter. I couldn't. I couldn't do it.
I read it for the reason that I used to watch the evening news every night just to get pissed off, and I think that's why I continued reading that horrible book. But the book is about going to war, and it's about not in the physical sense, but it's about resolving some internal conflicts with yourself, getting your head right to deal with this stuff, developing resolve to do it, and then executing it in a way that you mean it. Because if you don't mean it, crazy will beat you every time.
That's right. That's right. And because the book is primarily directed at couples, I worked with a woman today whose boyfriend is going through a very contentious, high-conflict divorce with crazy, and even though he has all of the information available, he's not holding firm boundaries. And as we've said before, and we state many times in the book, if this is you and you're in a new relationship and crazy is still trying to interfere and cause problems in your life and your new relationship and your new family, you must be a united front against her. One half of the couple can't be doing most of the work. You both have to agree to and enforce whatever boundaries you are going to put in place, and you cannot deviate from that. Because if your boyfriend or your husband is still thinking he can stick his head in the sand and crazy will eventually go away and leave him alone, he's sadly mistaken, because by sticking his head in the sand, he's just giving crazy a better shot at his butt.
Well, and the fact is that if he's putting his head in the sand, this is for the second wives out there, unfortunately, you're the sand, which takes the blow. And again, I know I'm going to get criticized for this a little bit. That's okay. It's true. Every human being, including men, have an obligation, if they're in a committed relationship, to have a boundary around that relationship, to have a boundary around what happens to them individually in the relationship, to have a boundary around the relationship, between the relationship and the rest of the world, and a boundary around the children and the marriage or the partnership or whatever you have and the rest of the world. And frequently guys will get out a bad marriage. They'll have family and lawyers drag them through it. They'll go see a therapist. They'll go off and get it in another marriage. And of course, crazy doesn't realize that they're divorced, at least not in the sense of her stopping the abuse and stopping the craziness.
When men recouple, crazy will often escalate because it's like a second abandonment, a second perceived abandonment.
Yep. But what these guys do often is they shut themselves in caves. They continue to do what they did in the marriage, which did not work for them, which was to coddle crazy and to give in to her and to put up with that. But then in the next relationship, that means everybody that's connected to him is paying the price for that. And it is an unfair arrangement. It is not adequate, in my opinion, to expect your children or your new partner to put up with crazy just because you got used to it in the relationship and managed to and these guys a lot of times don't even realize they're still not divorced. If they're still putting up with her, they're not divorced from that situation. Divorce means bye-bye. And even when they're children, then what is it, the three B's you say? Blood,
Yes,
brains, and...
brain damage.
Yes. Those are necessary items to speak to your ex about if you've got a crazy ex, and nothing else really is. You don't need to speak about anything else with them, but these guys will keep doing this, and then they end up with friction in the new relationship. The new wife or girlfriend feels frustrated, and she starts feeling uncared about because she's like sitting and saying, why is this guy just sitting here putting up with this? Now his kids are bad-mouthing me and disrespecting me because the ex is telling them that I'm the homewrecker and that I'm the reason that their dad is gone. So now they hate me, and he's sitting there doing nothing. My suggestion for women in that situation is that, if you're not making a decision with him, you better start thinking about your own decisions. Because if you wait around for somebody else that's not capable, it's just like we say, crazy is going to be crazy the next morning. If you find out the guy you're with will never, ever draw a boundary around your relationship and prevent this woman from destroying it, then you're probably with the wrong guy. Well, that's sad, isn't it?
Yes, but that's the harsh reality, and I have to wonder if one of the reason why, I can't remember the exact statistic, but second marriages have an even higher divorce rate than first marriages, and I often wonder if that has to do with the issues we're talking about here. I mean, not all of them, of course, but
I think part of the higher divorce rate in second marriages is that people have already been through one, and they're sort of like pre-disaster, and they're saying, well, look, I'm not going to drag this out for 10 years.
yeah.
So there's part of that, but I'm quite sure that high conflict exes play a significant role in the frequency of divorce in second marriages and in the breakup of second relationships, second primary relationships like that. Of course they do, because they pressurize the lives of everybody in the new family unit, whether it's just a couple or whether it's a family with children. They put intense pressure on everybody. They do it constantly. And if you don't have two like really cognizant, aware grown-ups working in unison together, crazy will beat you every time. But the good news is that you can actually beat this. But getting two people to do it together is the trick, and that's why we wrote the book.
Mm-hmm. And it's it's not easy, and the women I work with who are in this situation, who are meeting with me solo because their husbands don't believe in therapy, or they went to therapy with crazy and they're not doing that again. To me, ladies, if that is you, that's not a good sign. And I'm not saying that many men have a very, very good reason to mistrust mental health professionals. It is a biased field. But if he was actually in a long-term relationship that was abusive emotionally and or physically, he has residual issues from that. And he does need to address them. And if he refuses to address them while he's still allowing crazy to rampage through his life and by virtue of your relationship, your life, that does not bode well. That does not bode well, because being in an abusive relationship, some of the jargon, if you read about BPD, etc., on the internet, it's you catch fleas from living with crazy, which means that you probably learned some defensive coping mechanisms that are unhealthy because you were with somebody who was so unhealthy. In the psychoanalytic terms, it's called defensive mirroring, where you will sometimes act in the ways that your abuser did in order to protect yourself, or you develop avoidance skills. to avoid having conflict, to avoid anything unpleasant, really. And those are all things, if you're with a healthy person who is an adult, you can resolve conflict. You don't try to avoid it, because that's just going to cause problems in the new relationship. So ladies, if your husband or boyfriend isn't willing to look at the damage he sustained as a part of this relationship, because many times it's not once you get out of the relationship, you're just hunky-dory. You've sustained trauma. And if you have family of origin issues that led you to get involved with crazy in the first place, you've also got to look at that stuff. So it can be very difficult. And sometimes, yes, I think the new partner has tough decisions of her own to make. Because it's like, so should another person sacrifice their life to, crazy, who never even had a relationship with her to begin with, or him?
Yep. So when you start a new relationship, ladies, if you're telling yourself things like, okay, I realize she's crazy and she's still making his life chaos, and you're in the very beginning and you tell yourself, but I can handle that, I bet you'll be saying something different a year or two down the road.
Well, you can handle that if he's handling it with you.
Yeah, but if he's not, you will be saying something different, because this stuff is like sprinkling lighter fluid on a relationship and throwing a match on it if you allow it to happen. There was something else I wanted to ask you about, and it's something that comes up a lot in this work, and it is semi-related to, I mean, it's all this stuff is interrelated, but perseveration of what you see when you are working with people, that when you get people that just cycle the same information around in their head constantly, it is just a broken record over and over again. Can you believe she did this? Can you believe she did that? I can't believe she did this. They're like, I've seen guys that were, 14, 15 years in a relationship, and all they ever said was, can you believe she did this? Can you believe she did that? How often in your practice do you see this as an obstacle to guys getting unstuck out of that and moving on, and what do you think are the causes of it?
Well, it's a small percentage of my practice. It's fortunately not a lot. I think there are many folks out there who have that issue, but they don't make up a large percentage of the men and women I work with. But I do encounter that periodically. And look, that's natural to go through that when you're in the beginning of waking up to this stuff and getting out, because when you've been in a relationship like that, in order to survive in it, you have to repress a lot of the really crazy abusive stuff, or minimize it, or ignore it. Otherwise, you can't stay in it. When I was coming out of my relationship with a crazy ass narcissist, it would come to me like, wow, did I really fly and coach while he sat in business and thought that was okay? And those memories will come to you, like, wow, like there was okay, that was another line that he or she crossed. That was another line that he or she crossed, because you, like I said, you've got to desensitize yourself to it. Otherwise, you can't stay in it. Well, actually, you shouldn't desensitize yourself to it. That's part of the numbing out process, and then you're in the relationship. It's better to be awake and realize that stuff isn't okay and get the hell out. But back to my original point. So some of that is natural, like, wow, I can't believe I put up with that. Can you believe he did that? Can you believe she said that? Can you believe she did this? But if you're still stuck on that loop over and over again, and the relationship's over, and it's months later or years later, that is a problem. And I think, in not in every case, but I think in many cases, what that is indicative of is a person who is experiencing a narcissistic injury.
By that, you mean the narcissism of, I can't believe that somebody did that to me.
Correct.
Yeah, so there is a narcissistic element to that. Nobody
Often,
should treat me that way. Yeah.
right, but also I want to add too for the people who are experiencing a serious and look, there are narcissistic injuries. We all suffer them. Even people who aren't narcissists, we have them. Um, but when you're stuck on it, I think in most cases it goes back to wounds that mom or dad inflicted in childhood. And the guys who are doing that, when it's a narcissistic injury and they're stuck there, are saying, I did this for her. No, but no other man ever treated her the way I did. I took her, I flew her here, I bought her this, I set her up in her own condo. I I took care of her kids and paid for their college tuition, and how could she treat me like this after all I did for her? So it's like, because she's a narcissist or a borderline, and that's what they do. It doesn't matter how much money you spent on her. It doesn't matter how good you were to her kid. It doesn't matter how nice the car you gave her was. That's what they do. But they can't. But that's the narcissistic injury. Is that I did all of this for her, and how dare she not be grateful? And it's like, because it's not about you and how well you treated her. They shit on people who are kind to them and generous to them.
One way that I think is helpful to be able to tell a difference in that is that if you are going through the perseveration in a breakup, and it's not typical of how you live your life in other ways, then you've got a narcissistic injury that every human being is going to get and go through in a relationship. I don't care who you are, you're not going to be exempt from that period of trying to make sense out of what happened, trying to figure out what really happened here. I can't believe that. But if you're with somebody who is in that state with almost everybody else in their lives, or it's a repeating cycle with them all the time, I think that's where you've got a real narcissist versus somebody with just having a narcissistic injury that comes out in that way with the perseveration at the end of a relationship. So if that's the only time it happens, just realize while you're perseverating that, you know, sooner or later you're supposed to not do that.
Yeah, and the answer is, and this is what's, I guess it's difficult for some people to grasp. It's like, you know, how could she do that? Why could she? Why? And it's just like, because crazy people do crazy things and disordered people do disordered things. And there's really no deeper meaning to it. And of course, you know, most of us are meaning-making creatures, right? You know, if something happens, we want to understand why. And it's like, because she's a messed up person who had a messed up childhood, and she's doing messed up things, and then, you know, which is a whole slippery slope, because then I need to feel sorry for her, and she can't help it. You can have compassion, but actually, yes, she could help it. There are moments when they do behave themselves. But to go back to your original question, sorry, I'm just tangenting tonight. It's, you know, if you are stuck in that place, you know, I think it's, you got to look at the childhood stuff, because in almost every case I can think of where I've worked with a man who was in that sort of that rumination loop, it went back more often than not to their moms, and they were repeating that, and they had, you know, finally done everything, and, you know, they were the perfect little boy or the perfect little boyfriend to this woman, and they still got jacked.
Yep. God, this is all such tough stuff. It is. I mean, and it's one thing. It's really easy to sit here and discuss it intellectually when it's not happening to you. But what you will find is that even, I mean, you could go learn everything in the world about narcissistic injury and how it happens, and understand that it doesn't make you a narcissistic personality disorder to go through that, and you can understand the mechanics of it mentally, and then if you get in a breakup, you're going to go through it anyway. So that's always a lot of fun.
But that's another good point, Paul, because that's a trap. So a lot of guys I work with, they become experts in narcissism or borderline personality disorder because they're reading everything they can find on the internet, watching YouTube videos, downloading books on it, but it's still not making them feel any better. So I think recovering from one of these relationships, yes, educating yourself about these disorders, these types of personalities is important because you do need to understand, like, look, it wasn't personal. They are emotional predators. But I think there's a trap in that going into the understanding it intellectually, there's a tendency to avoid dealing with the emotional side of it, and that is the grief. And there's no way around it. You have to go through it.
Yep. If I'm talking to somebody that is coding me straight out of the DSM and knows their stuff about all these disorders, and I happen to notice that they're also still a complete emotional wreck, I'm going to recommend that they put the books down. Yeah. And start looking at their feelings and their heart and their boundaries and things like that, because it's easy to try to intellectualize. It is not a refuge. It is a dead end every time, and it may be a good temporary crutch for a little while for some people, but long term you're still going to have to grieve, and or you can not grieve. You could end up drinking, drugging, acting out, getting crazy yourself, doing all kinds of things. People do crazy stuff. Really good, normal people sometimes do some really horrible things during breakups. That's a natural part of it, but I think the more that you actually face your emotional state and don't intellectualize, the less likely you are to do that. We've only got a couple of minutes here because we started late, but we're getting near that time anyway. I wanted to make a couple of announcements if I could, or is there any final thoughts that you want to impart on what we've talked about before I do that?
Not tonight.
Okie doke. That's Dr. T. She says what she means and doesn't need to add to it. No need for icing on the cake. Okay. I want to announce that the plan is right now, you will be seeing Going Mental less frequently in the future, if at all. I mean, the plans are not set yet, but we are going to do a program in concert with the book that we have coming out, which of course is, again, more shameless plugging in the book, but it is actually a more accurate portrayal of the area that Dr. T and I both have the most interest in. So we are changing the name of this program to Say Goodbye to Crazy, and we are moving to Dr. T's channel on YouTube. There is a link in the low bar. So I suggest if you like this program, and there's a lot of people that watch it these days, go in and subscribe to Dr. T's channel, because we will be setting up the programming through there, and doing that. It's going to be work I do separate from ABFM, which is something that I've already addressed on the pages of the website. But we're going to do this thing over on her channel, so please go into the low bar, go in there and subscribe to Dr. T, and we will be probably doing little short promos on my channel for the people that don't see this, to remind them to come over to Dr. T's channel, because there's a work that I do at A Voice for Men there's a big overlap between our audiences, but there is a difference between the two, and we want to tailor this for the people that are really interested in this subject that we talk about. And so that's that. I mean, I don't have anything else to add, except, expect very soon. Oh, yes, two quick things. One, we're in the middle of our fundraiser, our quarterly fundraiser on A Voice for Men. Please go over there and help us out and help us reach our goals so we can do some more good work. And we've got the conference coming up in Houston in October. where we plan on having a lot of fun. Tickets will start on sale there. We're expecting on April 2nd. So we're looking forward to that. And there'll be announcements here about that and announcements on the site. But with that, I'll give you one last shot, Dr. T. Is there anything else that you want to add to this?
No.
She said no once, and I asked her again. She said the same thing. Okay, looks like it's a no, folks. Now, you know something? I know that no means no, okay, and that yes means yes.
And maybe means?
Except when it means maybe or no.
Maybe I'm thinking about it.
That's a whole different show. Okay, you guys have fun. Thanks for showing up. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.